Давайте начнем. Да, я знаю, что это очень типично для России, начинать на 15-20 минут позже. Я уверяю вас, закончим мы точно вовремя. Доброе утро. Революция. Let me introduce Glenn Hughes, CEO of Mindshare Group Russia, who will be your navigator today, who is hosting this conference, and we hope that you will enjoy it.
Это Антон Копотов, он очень важный человек для Mindshare, потому что он организовал эту конференцию сегодня. Спасибо большое. And thank you very much all for coming. We understand that you're all very busy people, and time is very important to everybody. I hope that we will not disappoint. In fact, I'm sure we will not disappoint today. We have gathered an excellent list of speakers from Mindshare, from WPP, and outside our network, and they're all experts, practitioners, clients, businessmen, and they've all got very, very interesting points of view on what is happening and what is changing in media today. I think that it is very important, or it is very much the right time for us to be debating the future of media, be it on a global or a local scale. We have a market in Russia which is experiencing rapid growth. We had 20% advertising revenue growth last year, and it will be very much double-digit growth this year. That in itself gives us pressure, but also whilst that's happening, our clients are also beginning to ask us very challenging and important questions about the types of communication solution that we give them, and also the need and desire to look for more integrated solutions. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Anton, who's going to talk a bit more specifically about the agenda for today and what each of the speakers are going to be saying.
Спасибо. Очень коротко. Мы назвали конференцию сегодняшнюю «Медиареволюция. Прыжок в будущее». Мы уверены, что сейчас мы переживаем очень интересные, очень сложные времена. Мы в революции. Да, революция, которая подстегивается массами, нашими потребителями, нашими людьми, потребителями товаров и услуг. Изменяться не обязательно. Не обязательно реагировать на эту революцию. Люди, которые были на Титанике, после того, как Титаник столкнулся с айсбергом, еще 2 часа танцевали и думали, что все хорошо, все будет замечательно. Но я думаю, что для того, чтобы адекватно отреагировать на те изменения, которые происходят, мы должны поделиться мнениями. Именно поэтому мы пригласили ключевых спикеров из Mindshare, из Group, из WPP, из наших партнеров. Вопрос первый, который мы поднимем сегодня, это как изменяется источник влияния, кто влияет на душу, на сознание, на кошельки людей, каким образом эти источники формируются, ну и что будет в будущем наиболее важным. Газеты, журналы, телевидение, digital, mobile. Об этом расскажет Скотт Сорокин, Global Head of Digital Mindshare. Он будет первым докладчиком. Как технологии, как интернет влияет на то, как мы относимся к политике, на то, как мы относимся к экономике, на то, как мы относимся к семейным ценностям и так далее. Об этом расскажет Джеффри Колл. Джеффри Колл из Annenberg School of Economics. Он из Соединенных Штатов Америки. Джеффри очень частый докладчик на различных семинарах, конференциях. Он возглавляет всемирный интернет-проект, который проходит в 35 странах мира. Ну и не так давно он участвовал в встрече Большой Восьмерки. Он приехал к нам из Афин, где участвовал на глобальном саммите Google. И через 2 дня уезжает консультировать президента Чили по вопросам социальных сетей и интернета и так далее. Джефф является советником Белого дома, а также советует около 10 различным другим правительствам в мире именно на эту тему. Мы живем как шоперы, мы любим шопинг. Шопинг — это наша жизнь. как меняется шопинг ввиду глобальных изменений. Об этом расскажет Дэвид Рот из The Store WPP. Далее в 1:15 у нас будет небольшой обед. В 2 часа мы соберемся сюда, чтобы прыгнуть сразу в 2021 год. У нас есть человек, который живет в этом году, гость из будущего, он будет приветствовать нашего гостя из будущего. Вот. Ник Зонеман из компании Trend One покажет небольшой театр, покажет представление, которое именно будет вам показывать, что будет через 10 лет. Вот. И заметит ли искусственный интеллект человеческий. Марк Римини из Mindshare, Global Head of Communication, около 4 часов расскажет нам о том, каким образом должны измениться мы как агентство, вы как клиенты, вы как средства массовой информации для того, чтобы адекватно отреагировать на те изменения, которые сейчас происходят, как должны поменяться наши организационные структуры, как должны поменяться наши процессы внутренние, ну и что ожидает будущее отношений между агентствами, клиентами и средствами массовой информации. Ну и закончим мы день панельной дискуссии, где будет участвовать топ-люди из медиа, из представителей рекламодателей, из представителей рекламных агентств. Мы обсудим вопрос, насколько те тренды и тенденции, которые мы услышим сегодня от наших глобальных коллег, свойственны России, и что нужно сделать, чтобы в России революции не были столь кровавые, жестокие, чтобы они были такими же бархатными и мирными, как в других странах мира. Я передаю слово Скотту. Скотт Сорокин, Head of Digital Global at Mindshare.
Thank you. Alright, so the presentation that I'm going to take you through is called the Media Landscape, and it's about the changing source of influence. And I think that all of us realize the impact and change in our business and in marketing and communications over the last, especially in the last couple of years, just how strong this has been and what's happening with the consumers and how social media is changing the world in many ways and the impact. And this presentation is really about just explaining some of those changes and how we see it and how we see that change is impacting how we do business and how our clients will do business in the future. And it's quite interesting to see. So how does digital change how great marketing gets done? This is really the fundamental, right? Is it changing and how is it changing and what's the impact and how do we need to look at this differently than we have in the past? I'd like to start with this chart, which is I think quite interesting. And if you notice on the left-hand side, it starts in the 1800s and it goes to about 2020. And whether you disagree with the landscape in general, you can see the impact that newspapers had on local marketplace, radio on that, television on radio and newspapers, etc. And then here in the in the late sort of as the web started right here in '94 and etc. And the increase to about 2010 where we are, the impact of digital media has played quite a big role. And we can continue to see those things happening. The big shift, however, is that we're not seeing all this content here from television, video, and print disappearing. It's not becoming less. It's moving over to the right. Right? It's moving. It's just in different containers. And I think that's one of the adaptations that we need to think about is that now it sits on our tablets or our iPads. We're getting that on all different devices. And I think that's a really important note. It's not going away. In fact, people are watching more television. They're reading more books. They're seeing all that stuff in many more ways. It's not disappearing. It's just becoming more. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. But the big change, truly, is that as digital has entered the fray and become really mainstream in terms of how people are using it, it is this idea that consumers are in control, right? The fact is that they increasingly have say on what they see, when they see it, how they see it, and what forms they see it in. And that's ultimately one of the biggest changes that we see in the marketplace. And that means that we're all affected by that as we create content, as we look to how we're going to communicate and engage with consumers. That's going to be a major, major impact of what we're doing. The other thing to note is the change in the way media and media owners behave. And I like this little chart, and it's "Your chocolate is my peanut butter" is the headline. But it's quite interesting because if you can read it or not, that this area over here is the union of social networks. This is the land of search over here. Up above is the platform plateau, like OS and things like that. So all these different areas, if you would, within technology in that world. And if we map Google, for example, and see what their migration has been, we generally see them as a search company, right? They're seen as a behemoth in search. That's how you think of them. But they're actually in many, many other areas. They've moved into social networks, or attempted to in many ways. They're in location-based services. They're certainly in advertising in a huge way. They've moved into OS and UI with Android and Chrome, right? So these companies are not sitting still, right? So these companies have gone from technology companies into media. We look at Facebook, same thing. Started traditionally, right? We think about them being a very young company, but social network is their sweet spot. And as they've moved into land of identity, certainly in advertising, gaming, 50% of what people do, the 700 million or so people that are on Facebook, are gaming, or playing games, social games. So it's an enormous shift of what's going on. And don't be surprised if you see Facebook move up into platform plateau in mobile and other areas. And the last is Apple, and these are just 3 examples. Apple, that starts off as a platform, has moved very heavily, obviously, into the land of e-commerce with iTunes and iBooks and everything else they do in that space. Certainly into advertising with iAds, location-based services and everything else, and UI and into that world. So we see, and this is just 3 of the top 10 technology companies, we see the overlap of where they are. They're not sitting still, they're moving, they're very active, they're not static. And I think it speaks a lot to the way our entire business is moving. It's very, very active. And we have to consider that as we go forward. These are some of the major players. You can add Microsoft to this and a number of others in there, but this is all moving very, very fast. So how's this affecting the way we've done business for the last 100 years? Basically, the way we have operated has been like archery. So whether you're Unilever or you're Procter & Gamble and you're carpet bombing a target, that's one way of thinking about it. Or if you're laser targeted and you know exactly your consumer, you're able to pinpoint them and talk to them directly. But basically it has been archery. We've basically been playing archery as advertisers. We target, we focus, we hit them, and we hit them sometimes and obliterate them. Sometimes we're talking to them and engaging them. But the future, and I would contend the future is going to look a lot more like ping pong, right? It's going to be an engagement with the consumer. And sometimes we serve, and sometimes they serve to us. Sometimes they start the conversation and back and forth. And this is a very, very different way of thinking about the way that we create and engage in marketing communications. And I would contend that this world of archery is probably not skills that we will continue to bring forward as we go on. It'll be about placement and less about targeting. It'll be about engagement, and this is going to be a very interesting space, and we're already seeing this happen. So the issue is, how do you engage? How do you play the game? And it's different every time. And so it's a big, big shift in terms of the world. So this is the old funnel that most of us have lived with and developed and drives a lot of our marketing as we move forward. The premise being, as much as you can put into awareness will sort of leave itself and leave its mark down to purchase and loyalty, just to simplify. But the world has shifted, and this is I'm going to call it a McKinsey study, but our LG friends are in the room. This was actually done on the back of LG and a case study with LG last year. And it's this idea of this consumer journey. And the idea that was presented and pushed through, and I think you'll find this in Forrester and a number of other people who think about this in terms of this world, the consumer journey, and I think Marco will talk about this later, is that we actually begin today with a much smaller consideration set